युवा ग्रेजुएट की विवेचनात्मक और विश्लेषी प्रतिभाओं को उभारने हेतु की गई थी। इस सीरीज के कोऑर्डिनेटर्स हैं मिस्टर अजय गुप्ता, मिस्टर सौरभ सिंह एंड मिस मानवी सारस्वत। इवेंट आरंभ करने से पूर्व मैं आज नेशनल टीचर्स डे के महत्वपूर्ण दिवस पे हमारे सभी उपस्थित टीचर्स को नमन करना चाहूंगी और उनका हमारे जीवन को सार्थकता देने हेतु आभार व्यक्त करना चाहूंगी। गुरुर् ब्रह्मा गुरुर् विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरा, गुरुर् साक्षात परम ब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरुवे नमः। माँ सरस्वती जो विद्या, संगीत, कला एवं प्रकृति की देवी है और जो हमें ज्ञान और चेतना देती है, चलिए अब उन माँ सरस्वती को हम नमन करते हुए उनका आशीर्वाद लेते हैं।
मातृ प्रणाम 1 2 3। या कुंदेन्दु तुषार हार धवला, या शुभ्र वस्त्रावृता, या वीणा वरदंड मंडित करा, या श्वेत पद्मासना, या ब्रह्माच्युत शंकर प्रभृतिभिर्देवै सदा वंदिता, सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निशेष जाड्यापहा। अर्थात जो विद्या की देवी भगवती सरस्वती कुंद के फूल, चंद्रमा, हिमराशि और मोती के हार की तरह धवल वर्ण की है और जो श्वेत वस्त्र धारण करती है, जिनके हाथ में वीणा दंड शोभायमान है, जिन्होंने श्वेत कमलों पर आसन ग्रहण किया है तथा ब्रह्मा, विष्णु एवं शंकर आदि देवताओं द्वारा जो पूजित है, वही संपूर्ण जड़ता और अज्ञानता को दूर कर देने वाली माँ सरस्वती हमारी रक्षा करे। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू मिस्टर विशेष। अब मैं आज के मुख्य अतिथि डॉक्टर आनंद कुमार को आमंत्रित करना चाहूंगी। सर इज एन एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ हिस्ट्री इन मोतीलाल नेहरू कॉलेज, यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ दिल्ली। He has done his undergraduate, postgraduate and MPhil from University of Delhi. एक बेहद रोचक फैक्ट ये है कि सर ने अपना टीचिंग करियर श्यामलाल कॉलेज इवनिंग से स्टार्ट किया है। So this college is just like a second home for him. He has almost 20 years of teaching experience and has published 2 books and 10 research papers in international and national journals. He has presented more than 10 papers in seminars, workshops and conferences. He also has a deep understanding on medieval Indian history, especially on historiography, environment, and economic history. Sir, please come and bestow us with your valuable words.
बहुत धन्यवाद श्यामलाल कॉलेज इवनिंग परिवार ने मुझे आज ये मौका दिया है कि मैं वापस अपने, जिसको अभी प्रीति ने कहा सेकंड होम, ये सेकंड होम नहीं, मनीष और डीएन सर वगैरह जानते हैं, ये मेरा फर्स्ट होम है। और मैं जितना जुड़ाव इस कॉलेज से अभी तक महसूस करता रहा हूँ आज भी और सॉरी, तो ये मेरे लिए वाकई, और ये मैं कोई केवल औपचारिकता के नाते, कोई फॉर्मेलिटी के नाते नहीं कह रहा हूँ, I really mean it, that how much does it matter to me to be, amongst the students of Shamlal College Evening. There was a time when I was there, I was teaching there, so I mean, many of the students are still in touch with me. Many of them, doing very well in many areas, in politics, in law, in also in sports. And many of them are still in touch with me. So it means so much to me that I'm back to the students again. So thanks a lot for that. मनीष ने 5 सितंबर को मुझे याद किया। ये और भी थोड़ा ऐड कर देता है इस इम्पोर्टेंस को। टीचर्स डे एक दिन होता है कि जब टीचर्स बच्चों को याद आते हैं और बड़ी शिद्दत से याद आते हैं। आज बहुत सारे ऐसे बच्चे भी हमें याद कर रहे होते हैं जो, और यही एक हमारी शायद पूंजी है, जिसे आप कह सकते हैं कि जब आप के पुराने बच्चे जब आपको याद करते हैं, तो मेरे लिए श्यामलाल कॉलेज इवनिंग के बच्चों ने याद किया, सो इट मेक्स सो वेरी स्पेशल टू मी। So thank you, Manish, in particular, and also to the entire department of this Shamdal College evening. Now, sorry, I'm told that today Samriddhi is going to speak on revisiting epics, and she would be speaking on North Indian, South Indian, and Greek mythological works. You see, this word revisiting, this is so very important. I mean, in historical framework. So this revisiting, it tells you a lot. This and it gives you an idea that there is something which is pricking the researcher, and he or she wants to look at it again. And this is the strength of history. That when we, keep revisiting, the text, when we are rereading the texts, whenever we are revisiting it, we come across many facets that may have been, ignored or may have been just एक सेकंड, सॉरी, वो थोड़ा आज मेरा बैड थ्रोट है, थोड़ा सा लग रहा है। तो ये जो रिविजिट है, ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है हिस्टोरिकल, जो एक हमारा जो पूरा प्रोसेस है, प्रोसेस ऑफ इंक्वायरी है। सो आई एम वेरी हैप्पी दैट समवन इज ट्राइंग टू रिविजिट, relook, the epics with a new perspective. I am, and I'm very keenly, awaiting for the presentation to be done, because, as I told you, that this revisit will definitely bring about many new facets that may have been, not brought to light till date. So I wish all the best to Samriddhi for her presentation, and we all would be listening very, very carefully and, interestingly to the talk. So thank you very much.
थैंक यू सर। आज का विषय काफी रोचक और दिलचस्प है। मिस समृद्धि ने अपने शोध में मुख्य रूप से 4 महाकाव्यों का विश्लेषण किया है। पहला, उन्होंने वेद व्यास की महाभारत का चयन किया है, फिर इलांगो अधिगिल की शूलापतिकरम, और फिर ग्रीक माइथोलॉजी के लिए होमर की इलियड का व्याख्यान दिया है। साथ ही वे इन महाकाव्यों द्वारा कई महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दों पर चर्चा करने वाली है, जैसे नारी सशक्तिकरण, महाकाव्य में पाई जाने वाली प्राकृतिक सौंदर्य और उसका प्रभाव, महाकाव्यों के मुख्य नायकों का व्यर्थ वैभव, और जीवन और मरण की गाथा और उससे भाग्य का प्रभाव। वे ये भी बताएंगी कि कैसे हम आज भी कहीं ना कहीं अपनी संस्कृति और कल्पित कथा से प्रभावित रहते हैं। तो और विलंब नहीं करते हुए अब मैं आज की मुख्य वक्ता को आमंत्रित करना चाहूंगी, मिस समृद्धि कandpal, a graduate scholar and a student of SLA Uttaranchal University.
Hello everyone, I hope my screen is visible to all of you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Alright, so before starting off with the epic and moving on with my presentation, I would like to wish all the teachers present here a very happy Teachers' Day. I'll be not starting off with my topic. You all might be well aware of what the topic is. It is revisiting epics, the Greek and the Indian mythology. So before getting straight into the talk, I would like to provide you all with a brief glimpse of whatever I shall be looking upon in this talk. The overview is, I'll be giving an introduction to the term epic that shall comprise of the definition, categories, characteristics, importance, and some major examples. I have considered 3 classical epics, out of which 2 are the classical Indian epics that include Mahabharat by Vedvyas, which is a North Indian epic, and Shilapatikaram by Ilango Adigal, which is a South Indian epic. I'll be making a thematic study of these 2 classical Indian epics. The classical Greek epic that I have considered for my talk is the Iliad by Homer, and in the conclusion of my talk, I shall be giving a comparison of the Indian and the Greek epics that shall encapsulate the similarities, differences, and decoding the connections between the 2 epics. So without any further ado, let us get straight into the talk. First of all, Introduction to the term epic. What is an epic? Merriam-Webster defines epic as a long narrative poem in elevated style recounting the deeds of a legendary or a historical hero. A series of events or body of legend or tradition are thought to form the proper subject matter of an epic. So we see that some people consider epics as merely mythological, whereas some people consider it to be a part of, uh, mythology, and some consider it to be a part of history. But there is this dilemma that goes along with the epics. The epic tradition we talk about is great. It talks about the adventures of a hero. It is ancient, everlasting, and part of a classical higher literature. Coming to the categories of the epics, epics are categorized into two main parts. Number one are the primary epics, which are also known as the primitive folk or the oral epics. The second one are the secondary epics that are also synonymous to literary epics. So primary epics are the one that basically originated in the oral form and were later compiled into sequels, whereas secondary epics are the one that originate in the written form and then are published. So the examples of primary epics include Mahabharata by Ved Vyas, that was recited by Ved Vyas, and we all know that Shri Krishna, Lord Ganesha was the one who wrote it down. The second one is the Iliad, which is a major example of the the primary epics, and it was composed by the Greek bard Homer. The examples of secondary epics include Paradise Lost by John Milton, which is a very big famous text in the modern approach as well. Characteristics of the epics are, a very significant term to be considered because there are some elements that epics on the boundaries of the world resonate and reflect. I'll be giving you a brief, definition of all these characteristics of epics. The first one is anthropomorphism. Defining the term anthropomorphism, it is representation of immortals like human beings. Basically, it is attributing human characteristics to any immortal deity and bringing out the flaws as well as all the human attributes on any immortal. The second one is Deus ex machina. Deus ex machina is any incident in any epic where a problem gets resolved all of a sudden and the intervention of any power resolves a situation which was, preceding, it was completely hopeless. The third one is supernatural machinery. Supernatural machinery is basically the involvement of any supernatural or heavenly powers in a storyline. Deification and apotheosis are two terms that are often considered to be similar in epics, but deification is about treating a character like a god, it is treating a character like a deity, and it all depends on the faith of the person who is treating the other one like a god. On the other hand, apotheosis is a process where a character is raised to the stature of a god, and apotheosis is one that we, made very frequently. We see it in Shilapati, which is a South Indian epic. I'll be talking about the first epic, which is Mahabharata. The year of composition is between 3rd century BCE and 3rd century CE. Author is Ved Vyas. Now, there is this clash of critics that if Mahabharata was merely a myth or it was a history. So, if we consider T.R.S. Sharma, he says that there is no such mention of Pandavas in any historical records. So, it is proper only if we consider the Mahabharata as an epic poem. On the contrast of this assertion, in Yuganta by Irabati Karve, she states that Mahabharata is a history and Ramayana is a poem. Also, Sheldon Pollock, who is one of the widely reputed critics, he says that, however, much modern scholarship may complicate the factuality of that record. Yet, the Mahabharata was not only itihas, but also it was kavya. On the style of the poem, J.A.B. Van Buchanan tells about how the poem is structured, where he tells that poem is divided into two halves, each half containing into two quarters, which we basically refer to as pad. So the first four syllables of each eight are free, and the other four are parsed. There are 18 parvas in Mahabharata, and these 18 parvas are the one which divide the storyline of Mahabharata. There are several crucial aspects that are required to be considered if we see the critical study of Mahabharata. The first one is the question raised by Draupadi when she was being humiliated in the dicing hall. So the question that goes along with this is, was it really Lord Krishna who held Draupadi at the time of her disrobing? The third aspect is the born gods. In the North Indian epics, we see that the gods are born gods by nature. They are not made gods. The fourth one is the aspect of karma, dharma, and moksha that goes parallelly with the storyline of Mahabharata and plus all other Indian classical epics. The next one is family ties and family feuds that exist parallelly. And the last one, masculinity, war, and valor, which is an inevitable part of the classical Indian epics. So the question raised by Draupadi. Very few of us know that at the time Draupadi was being humiliated in the dicing hall, she was in her menstrual cycle. In the translation by J.A.B. Van Buitenen, Draupadi asserts, "It is now my month, this is my sole garment, man of slow wit." So this is, Draupadi's assertion that she makes to Dushasan when he was trying to strip her in the assembly hall. But very few of us know that despite being in her menstrual cycle, Draupadi had that audacity to, question the hegemonic masculine patriarchy at that time. There is this concept that is very fascinating where we can decode the savior of Draupadi. That was it really Lord Krishna who saved Draupadi at the time of her disrobing? There are a lot of stories that go along in the storyline of Mahabharata. So one of the story that goes is once Shri Krishna cut his finger with Sudarshan Chakra, and at that time Draupadi tore her veil to put it around Krishna's bleeding finger. And Lord Krishna was very touched by the gratitude done by Draupadi. And so he promises her to repay the debt and to protect her from all the evils. And as a result, he protected Draupadi when she prayed when her sari was being pulled after Duryodhana won her in the dice game. Shiv Puran attributes her miraculous rescue to a boon granted by sage Durvasa. And this storyline again goes in Shiv Puran as once Durvasa's loincloth was carried away by the currents of river Ganga, and at that time Draupadi quickly tore a piece of her garment to cover him. And at that time the sage was pleased by this gesture of Draupadi, and so he grants Draupadi a boon which caused an unending stream of cloth to cover her when Dushasan was trying to strip her in Hastinapur's royal dice hall. Again, we see that Sri Krishna, whom Draupadi summoned to save her from disrespect, is the one that we mainly consider in our studies. But in Vyasa's Mahabharata, the savior of Chirharan is actually someone else. This is attributed to Dharma, and Dharma is symbolic here. This means that it can be God Dharma, Krishna as the Lord of Dharma, or even Vidur or Yudhishthir. So it is not clearly stated that who was indeed the savior of Draupadi. There are several feminist views on Draupadi that also go, parallelly to the storyline of Mahabharata. The first one is by Irabati Karve. So, as I mentioned, the storyline here, Dushasan, in the third line, as you can see, it has been mentioned that unprotected amidst the protectors. And Irabati Karve, in her book Yuganta, she asserts Draupadi as Nathvati Anathvat, that is translated as having husbands but still like a widow. Irabati Karve also mentions the legal point of Draupadi's question, and she also, mentions some of the comments of some misogynistic writers who call Draupadi as Kritya of Dwapar Yuga. And if you don't know what Kritya is basically a demonic and bloodthirsty female. So we can see that how much misogynistic comments were, there against Draupadi. There is another critic who is Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, and in her book Palace of Illusions, she tells the whole storyline of Mahabharata from the eyes of Draupadi. And in one of the instances, we see that Draupadi says, "Fancy limbs for myself that are offspring of vengeance." She calls herself the girl who wasn't invited. So we see that how Draupadi was, subjugated since her childhood, and that didn't even stop even after she was married. The third one is by Rajeshwari Sundarajan, and Rajeshwari Sundarajan also talks about, the the brave attitude of Draupadi among all the men among that, patriarchy that ruled women at that time. He says that Draupadi doesn't let her nakedness shame her, despite the fact that she was being humiliated. And this was one of the rare attempts that we see in the classical Indian context. Draupadi had that courage within herself that she questioned the male patriarchy, and in the dicing hall when she was being humiliated and her clothes were being stripped off. The concept of karma, dharma, and moksha is inevitable in all the Indian classical epics. And for example, in Mahabharata, we see that it is Yudhishthir's dharma, as he apparently says, that a son will always respect his father. So we see that Yudhishthir, attributes this thing as his dharma. He attributes this thing that it is his duty to, play the game of gambling against, the wishes of other Pandavas, or against, because he knew that the outcomes could be negative as well. So karma, dharma, and moksha is all about, our right actions and our reaction to any situation, the righteous acts, and attaining, transcending the human realm after our actions. So the rebirth, life, and death is the cycle that goes along in Mahabharata, where dharma is one's place in society, it's one's duty, the righteous actions, and obviously it's one's path that he or she chooses. Karma is another one that basically encapsulates action and reaction, and it tells that what goes around comes around. And by following dharma, one builds up good karma. Moksha is all about escaping samsara. It is about attaining heaven. It is about escape from the cycle of life, death, rebirth, etc. And it is becoming one with the Brahman, and it is basically the ultimate goal of Hinduism. As Sri Krishna says, he is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. The next epic that I have considered is Shilapatikaram, which is a South Indian epic, and it was composed in the 5th and 6th century CE and was composed by a Jain monk, Ilango Adigal. So before going into the storyline and the critical analysis of the text, I would like to provide you all a brief outline or a brief glimpse of the classical Tamil literature and the 5 major epics. So the classical Tamil literature is basically termed as Sangam literature, and it dates back to 400 BCE to 250 CE. And the literature of this period was comprised of 3 main types of works. Number 1 was Ettu Tokai, the 8 anthologies. The second one is Pattu Pattu, which are the 10 long poems of the classical Tamil literature. And the third one is Tolkappam, which is a grammar treatise. The 5 major epics in classical Tamil literature are Shilapatikalam by Ilango Adigal, Mani Mekalai, which is again an extension of Shilapatikaram, and the author is Sithalai Satnar. The third one is Jivika Chintamani, which is by Tirutta Ketwar, and these 3 are the only epics that have been still reserved, and the other 2 epics, that is Valaya Pathi and Kundal Kisi, have been lost, and there are no such evidences to prove that these epics actually existed in the manuscript form. The Tolkappam, as I talked about, it is all about classification of the form and the content of poetry. It talks about the subject matter of a poem. In the modern world, we see there is this private and public dichotomy, and similarly, Tolkappam talks about Akam and Puram, where Akam is all about domesticity, the private sphere, the love life, where Puram talks about the outer world, the world of men, the royal kingdoms, royal feuds, and all the masculine endeavors. The structure of Shilapatikaram is in such a way that the epic is set in the capitals of 3 Tamil kingdoms. The first one is Pukar, and the book of Pukar has 13 cantos. Second one is Maturai, and the book of Maturai has 7 cantos. The third one is Vanshi, which has 10 cantos. So Chola kingdom, Pandya kingdom, and Chera kingdom are the one that have been depicted in the epic of Shilapatikaram. This is the geographical location of the Chola kingdom, the Chera kingdom, and the Pandya kingdom, that is there in the current political map of India. So we see that the Chola, Chera, and Pandya kingdom basically comprise of the parts of Tamil Nadu, a small part of Kerala, and also a small part of Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka's boundaries as well. This is the illustration of Kanagi, who was, the protagonist of Shilapatikaram. So Kanagi was basically deified after, she was enraged, and, she ripped one of her breasts off in the royal kingdom, and she was deified into the stature of a goddess after her anger against the false execution of her husband. And the people now worship as, Kanagi, which we see in the second image. This is Lord Murugan, and he is the one who is shown to be worshipped by the people of the place. And we see that there is this aesthetic beauty of Tamil kingdom that is depicted in various portions of the text. The vivid use of imageries is central to the plot, and it also gives a description of the people living close to nature. The important aspects include tribal culture of singing and dancing, the playful expedition, the joy of youth, innocence, and everything we see is in contrast to Kanaki's sadness. Now we see that there is this aesthetic beauty that is captured in Shilapatikaram. There is the significance of forests and the natural ambience that we see in Shilapatikaram. So the Indian keynote tree is, symbolic of Chera kingdom in Shilapatikaram. And we also see that there is the portrayal of women working in the fields, and they are singing the Valai song. And the dance that they are doing is Kuruvai. And also we see that there is the significance of the natural ambience and forest in the Indian epics. We constantly see that the flora and fauna, is inevitable in most of the classical Indian epics that we read. So in Mahabharata, for example, we see Lord Krishna mentioning about the importance of Vrindavan forests and the Kalpavriksha tree. And also we see that description of forests in the 14-year exile in Ramayana, or which we refer to as Vanvas. So we see that Ram, Lakshman, and Sita on their journey from Ayodhya to the south of India, we see that there is this whole use of flora and fauna and all the images of forest that it encapsulates. The Devdar forests in Mahabharata are also significant to be considered, because Devdar forests, are, as we know, are found in the higher altitudes, and that is apparently where gods are also found. So there is this temple in Manali which is hidden by temple, and that temple is significant when it comes to Mahabharat's historical history as well. The third epic that I have considered, as you might all be well aware of, is the Iliad, which was composed in the 8th century BCE and was composed by Homer. So there is this introduction to the classical Greek poetry, and specifically the Homer's poetries. So the Iliad, as we see, it basically captures the significant events of the final weeks of the Trojan War. And the Iliad is basically one of the earliest works in the whole Western literary tradition. It also, acted as a subject and story for many other later Greek, Roman, and Renaissance writings as well. And we see that Iliad, has been a part of ancient poems known as the epic cycle. And when these poems were recited, these were recited by a group of singers, and those singers or that group was basically termed as rhapsodies. There is this invocation to the muse, which encapsulate the 9 muses in the Greek literary tradition. And these 9 muses are, specific and, master of their field. And for example, if we consider Homer's Iliad, so Iliad is an epic poetry. So the muse that is invoked by Homer before he starts, his work is Calliope, which is a muse of the epic poetry. And like this, there are these 9 muses in Greek literary tradition, which are considered in different art forms and different cultural forms that we see in the Greek tradition. This is the Trojan family tree and the Greek family tree, which we see are fighting against each other. And the characters that are a matter of most interest, or of taken most interest in, are Achilles, Odysseus from the Greek family tree, and Paris, Hector from the Trojan family tree. So Achilles is one of the characters who has been studied by a lot of critics, and we can draw a parallel with the characters in the Indian mythology as well. So if we consider Achilles and his fate, we see that his whole life was full of struggles, and at the time he was on his deathbed. Homer's Iliad translates his situation as Achilles lay there fallen, tearing his hair, defiling it with his own hands. So we can also see that Achilles' situation is also sometimes considered to be in parallel with Karna's situation in Mahabharata. Karna and Achilles were both immortals, but they were killed in the Kurukshetra war and the Trojan war respectively. Also, we see that both are killed by arrows from behind, and we also see that there is this special attention that is paid to their armor as well. Also, it is interesting to know that the way Achilles died and the way Lord Krishna dies in Mahabharata is very similar in the approach. Achilles died when an arrow shot on his was shot on his heel, and it is the same way Lord Krishna died, because an arrow stuck to his heel and he left his physical body and left for the heavenly abode. So I'll be now coming to the comparison of the Greek and Indian mythology. The first thing that we see that is the women come out as the foremost element of the classical epics. For example, we see in Trojan War, we see Trojan War is all because of Helen. It is fought between the Greeks and the Trojans all because of Helen. In Mahabharata, we see the Kauravas and Pandavas are fighting against each other because of the humiliation of Draupadi. In Ramayana, we see Ram and Ravan fighting against each other because Ravan abducted Sita. And again in Shilapadikaram, we see Kanagi was, enraged by the false execution of her husband, and therefore she is deified into the stature of a goddess. So we see that women therefore come out as the foremost element of the classical epics. The second one is the stature of gods. So we see that there is this all-pervasive trinity. In Indian epics, we have Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar, and in Greek epics, we have Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. In Indian epics, where we see that the gods are treated as a supreme entity, in Greek epics, we see that the gods are, insecure of their position and are involved into human matters as well. In Homer's Iliad, Apollo, at one instance, he says, "We, the gods, will live as long as the humans believe in us. The day the humans no longer believe in us, all the gods will disappear." And this is the trinity that I was talking about. In Indian context, we see Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. And in Greek context, we see Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. The concept of life after death. So we see that, there is this incident in Mahabharata where Brihaspati tells Yudhishthir that only righteousness follows the body that is thus abandoned by them all. One endued with righteousness would attain that high end, which is constituted by heaven, and if endued with unrighteousness, he goes to hell. So we see that the concept of life after death is prominent in the passage of several narratives of a plethora of epics that we consider. For example, in Hindu mythology, we see it constitutes the doctrine of Swarg and Nark, and Lord Yam is the Hindu god of death, and fate is decided on the basis of pap and punya that a human makes. In the Greek mythology, we see there is this concept of heaven and hell, or the underworld, and Hades is the god of the dead, or the ruler of the underworld. The mention of seven deadly sins that came into existence after the onset of Christianity, changed the course of how we perceive hell or the underworld. And now, after Christianity, we see that Satan or Lucifer is the ruler of the underworld. I'll now establish the connection between the two mythologies. So, there are several connections that are between the Indian mythology and the Greek mythology, but it is not the exactly same representation. The connection are with different portrayals, and it all depends on the socio-cultural setup of India and of Greece. So it all depends on the social cultural setup, and on this, Devdutt Patnaik says, you don't need to appreciate the truth, you need to appreciate a truth which may not accommodate all truths. So even even despite the fact that the representation is not the same, is not exactly what we look for, but still there are connections with different portrayals. For example, Greek mythology teaches us the concepts like democracy, justice, and nation state. Also, Devdutt Patnaik, on his study of Natya Shastra by Bharat, which was a book of performative arts composed in 5th century BCE, it tells that the Indian mythological stories have this essence of having a happy ending. But Ramayana ended on a tragic note like Iliad. So Devdutt Patnaik also make this comment that Iliad might have been an inspiration for Ramayana's composition as well. I'd like to question you all with these two significant points that we see, that why do epics have a tragic end, and why do women come out as the centralized characters of the epic, and why the women's subjugation remains a prominent theme. For answering the first question, it can be seen that destiny is inescapable. So we see that epics are not basically just the ornamentalized works that look for the perfect. Rather, it is also about the human life, and they portray the struggles and tragedies. So they also provide us with a sense of consideration of our actions that we must make. So destiny is inescapable, and one cannot go beyond destiny, and whatever has been decided in the fate, that would happen. And this is what epics teach us. For the second question, that why women come out as the centralized characters of the epic, it can be seen that women in the Indian epics, for example, in Ramayana and in Mahabharata, have been treated as slaves, as property, as chattel, and basically used for the pleasure of men. Manu also says that of the seed and the womb, the seed is superior. That is basically women's role of wives, and women's role of mothers plays a very significant part. And though we see that Gandhari, Kunti, and Draupadi stood out for their, to question the male the patriarchy, they show that the women also, oppose the injustice that happened against them. Now, I would like to conclude my topic with this, a quotation by Devdutt Patnaik, where he says, "Within infinite myths lies the eternal truth. Who sees it all? Varun has but 1,000 eyes. Indra has 100. You and I only two." So we all know that there is this omnipresence of God, and we as humans are in search for that one eternal truth. But not every one of us is capable enough to find that truth and to transcend the human realm. But only after we study and we have to consider the epics that we have, we know that what endeavors we should make as humans. Epics are a part of our lives. They are sublime, elegant, moralistic, and supernatural in their approach. They encapsulate the essence of our lives, and they're spread across various boundaries of the world. They thus represent the certain aspects, and they have the strength to weave the stories, to build up the interpretations, and to signify the magnificence of the abstract and the spiritual. For example, in Indian epics, we see they epics encompass the righteous acts of dharma, and this dharma is incessantly portrayed in the storyline, and it justifies the deeds of the character. Now, I would like to conclude my topic. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay. Thank you so much, Samriddhi. Mythology is such a vast concept, and you have just means given it in a beautifully very represented it in a short period of time. And so we have some questions from the audience. The first question is from Anish Chaudhary. He is asking, क्या हम पौराणिक कथाओं को वैज्ञानिक संदर्भ में समझ सकते हैं? Should I repeat this in English?
Yeah, could you please repeat that once again?
Okay, sure. He's actually asking that can we understand mythology with reference to scientific context?
Basically, we see that in the modern world, we see that it is quite tough to actually associate the epics with the scientific concept, because epics are more of the part of philosophy and more of a part of history. So it is not that much easy to consider epics as scientific approach, but rather I would say that it is proper if we consider epics with some evidence of their historical evidence. For example, in Ramayana there is this mention when Ram when he was about to rescue Sita, he made this bridge from from the Kanyakumari to Lanka, and many of the people basically they questioned ki if Ramayana was history or it was basically a myth. So this study came 3-4 years back, and a satellite image of the Indian Ocean showed that in the Indian bed we see there is the whole structure of that bridge that still lies there. So it is not proper if we consider epics more of scientific approach, but rather they encapsulate something sublime, something supernatural. And if we consider epics to be scientific, it would not justify everything that we see in epics, because we question epics in context of in context of history, in context of myth, and that could only be justified if we see the evidence that we see in the modern world.
Okay. So the next question is from Anand Joshi. He's asking, Miss Samriddhi, you beautifully explain the similarities and differences between the epics. But I want to know that why do Hindu and Greek mythology have so many similar characters? Is it possible that they have originated from the same source?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question actually. So I mentioned in my presentation that Devdutt Patnaik, in one of his studies that he makes of Natya Shastra, he mentions there that Indian mythological stories have this essence of having a tragic of not having a tragic end, but rather having a happy ending. But we see that in Ramayana it doesn't happen. So in Mahabharata we see there is this war, but Ramayana ends on a tragic note similar to that of Iliad. And Devdutt Patnaik, as a critic, he also argues the fact that Iliad could have been, an inspiration for Ramayana's composition as well. I'd also like to mention one of the incidents. There was this Greek ambassador, Megasthenes, and once he came to, Chandragupta Maurya's kingdom that was in Patliputra, and in his work, he gives reference to Krishna in his work that was named Indica. So there he mentions Krishna in his work, and Krishna is represented as the Greek half god Heracles, and we see that spelling of Heracles is Heracles, and but we see that Heracles in contrast to what the spelling is, the scholars delineate Heracles as Hercules, that is Harikula and Es. So Hari for Heracles, that we see the half part is of Hari, and the second word is Kul. So it is clan of Hari, that is clan of Krishna. So we see that in Greek mythology, for example, if we consider Megasthenes, there is this similarity that we see of Krishna, where he has been compared to as half god. Also, we see that there are several similarities between the Indian and the Greek gods. For example, Dionysius and Lord Shiva. Dionysius is basically the god of wine, he's a god of ecstasy. And similarly, in Indian context, we see Lord Shiva, who is, both a benevolent and a malevolent god. So we see that there are these similarities, but though there are these similarities, as I mentioned, it all depends, these connections all depend on the socio-cultural setup and can vary according to the interpretations as well.
Okay, very well answered, Miss Samriddhi. The next question is from Tarun Mishra. He is asking, don't you think our present time is the same court of Dhritarashtra, where people are mum over exploitation of our women?
I think so, yeah, because we see that in modern world as well, women's subjugation hasn't left us. It has been a part of the classical Indian epics, and we see that this is ironical in itself. We talk about the Indian classical epics. We see that there is this doctrine of karma, dharma, moksha, the righteous acts transcending the human realm. We see that though the epics, which are apparently seen to be the one who are moralistic in their approach, they still have this, the flaws of humans imbibed in them. And in the, in the modern context as well, we see that this hasn't left us. There is the, the significance, the good is considered to be significant, but evil hasn't left us at all. We still remain, silent on many of the aspects that we consider to be wrong around us. But as Shri Krishna says in Mahabharata as well, our right actions only help us to attain, something beyond this human realm, to transcend something, to transcend this human realm, and basically attain the supernatural. So it all depends again on our karma, and obviously on dharma. And though we know that we remain silent on many of the aspects, but it should be imbibed in our minds that it shouldn't be so. Epics, though we criticize them at certain points, they teach us some moralistic values as well. So instead of following the same things like what Dhritarashtra did, where he was physically and metaphorically blind, we are still the same. But all we can do is try to encapsulate the good essence of the epics, and rather avoid the negativities, and become a more good individual from the moralistic values that epics teach us.
Okay. So the next question is from Yugangshi Chaturvedi. She is asking, what are your views about the epics being rewritten in a more believable way by contemporary writers?
Oh, okay. I'll say, like, there is this critic named Vivek Debroy. He says that myth is not in the text, but in the people's interpretation. So epics we see are, they have been interpreted, through these all years, and we see that there are different interpretations that are, attached to the epics. For example, if we considered, Mahabharata, we consider Draupadi's angle where she was humiliated. We see that in the early centuries, or in the earlier, in the preceding decades, we didn't see a modern feminist angle that was attached to Draupadi's, humiliation and disturbing. But with more of interpretations attached to it, and more of the critical, studies of the epics, we now see that, this epics have blurred the boundaries between what our interpretations are, and what the epics gave us as their crux or as their conclusion. So yeah, I would say that though epics have been interpreted in various forms by various critics, the essence of the epics still remains the same. The epics have the the power of sublime, elegant, moralistic approach, and that is what binds all the epics together, despite of the various interpretations that are attached to them.
Manvi, I think we are a little bit late, so I think we have to end our question and answer round.
Okay, sure, sir. Thank you, Miss Samriddhi. Now I will miss over to you, Miss Archana.
थैंक यू मिस मानवी एंड थैंक यू मिस समृद्धि। आपका टॉक सुनकर मुझे विश्वास है कि हमारी ऑडियंस को कई नई बातों का ज्ञान मिला होगा। आपने जैसे क्वेश्चंस का आंसर किया है, इससे ये पता चलता है कि आपने अपने टॉपिक पे कितना शोध किया है। अब मैं जीएसटीएस के अगले रविवार की प्रवक्ता मिस यशी को आमंत्रित करना चाहूंगी। मिस यशी, प्लीज कम एंड इंट्रोड्यूस योर टॉपिक।
जी, क्या मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
जी बोलिए।
जी, सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। इस हमने अलग-अलग समय पर अलग-अलग वक्ताओं को सुना है, जिन्होंने अलग-अलग मुद्दे उठाए हैं। इसी श्रृंखला में मैं यशी किरोड़ीमल महाविद्यालय से आप सभी को आमंत्रित करना चाहती हूँ अगले रविवार शाम वही 5 बजे, जहाँ पर हमने अलग-अलग ज्ञान लिया। अब किस मुद्दे पर बात होने वाली है? हम जब भी किसी भी ज्ञान को प्राप्त करते हैं, किसी भी चीज़ को जानते हैं, शायद हमारा सर्वोत्तम जो उद्देश्य होता है, वह होता है स्वयं को जानना, कि हम स्वयं को जान सकें। हम हैं कौन? आखिर हमारा व्यक्तित्व है क्या? क्या हम आज से कल कुछ बेहतर सीख पाए? क्या हम कल से परसों कुछ बेहतर हो सकेंगे? क्या सही रास्ते पर हम हैं? लेकिन उसे जानने के लिए आवश्यक है, पहले हम जान लें कि हमारा व्यक्तित्व क्या है। तो इसी की बात और इसी की चर्चा हम अगले रविवार को करेंगे, जहां हम समझेंगे कि आखिर व्यक्ति और मनुष्य में क्या अंतर है? आखिर व्यक्ति और व्यक्ति का व्यक्तित्व क्या है? व्यक्ति का व्यक्तित्व और उसकी वास्तविकता में कितना संलग्नता है और कितना उसमें विभेद है। वहीं हम ये भी जानेंगे एक व्यक्ति का व्यक्तित्व किन आधारों से बनता है, उसकी नैतिकता कहाँ से आती है, उसकी परवरिश का कितना योगदान है, क्या उसके लिए न्याय है और क्या उसके लिए धर्म है। इन्हीं सारे मुद्दों पर बात करते हुए और ये जानते हुए कि आखिर हम कौन है, हम फिर से बात करेंगे इसी दर्शन शास्त्र की, और वह दर्शन शास्त्र किस तरह से हमारे व्यवहारिक जीवन में आज के समय पर कितना प्रासंगिक है, यह जानेंगे हम अगले रविवार। तो मिलते हैं आपके साथ अगले रविवार। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू मिस यशी। मैं यहाँ उपस्थित सभी दर्शकों से निवेदन करूंगी कि वो जीएसटीएस के अगले टॉप जीएसटीएस 31 हु वी आर, हम है कौन, में आए और मिस यशी को सुने। जीएसटीएस की एक और प्रथा रही है कि हम अपने पिछले महीने के सबसे उत्तम वक्ता को स्पीकर ऑफ द मंथ का पुरस्कार देते हैं, और अब वो क्षण आ गया है जब हम अपने स्पीकर ऑफ द मंथ फॉर द मंथ ऑफ अगस्त को अनाउंस करें, जिसके लिए मैं डॉक्टर मनीष करवार, कन्वीनर ऑफ जीएसटीएस, को आमंत्रित करना चाहूंगी।
Thank you, Archana. I am Archana. So I'm glad to listen Miss Samriddhi Kandpal, a very vivid topic, and she had elaborated very nicely. And the coming GSTS Talk 31 also. So I'm very delighted to hear you, Samriddhi. So again, good evening to all. And today is the Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan's birthday. So happy Teachers' Day to dear my students, Anand sir, and other my fellow colleagues. I'm really very elated that you people are giving me this chance, because this is only the second time I'm going to speak about this stage and about the GSTS. So Sakshi Society, this is the History Society, and started the Graduate Scholar Talk Series since 7th February 2020. And I'm very happy and proud of my students. These are the students, and they are day and night, they are working very hard. Everyone put tremendous effort in this, and today we are going to announce the speaker of the month of last month. And we had 4 speakers, and everybody has their own capacity, their own credentials, and they produce really tremendous amount of literature. I mean literature, because I know we had started from GSTS 1 and we are reaching towards GSTS 31, and I'm really glad to listen to people how mature you are talking. ये मेरे लिए बहुत अच्छा लगता है, किसी भी टीचर के लिए अच्छा लगता है, और आज टीचर्स डे के दिन और अच्छा लगता है. So they spoke very well, their own capacity, effective talks. And the last month we had 4 talks. The first, Mr. Mudit Bhardwaj, citizen, a sardonic Sega from Samlal Evening College. And about this talk, give me 60 seconds. About this talk, this is very near to my heart. Why? Because the student, the Mudit Bhardwaj, had discussed so many things in only 23 minutes. And in the popular capacity also, we had around 100 students which are listening this talk. So thank you, Mudit, having within this GST talk. The second talk was Miss Amrita Ravi Sankar, Electoral Democracy in India, Burning Issues and Reforms, 8th August. And she was from Lady Sri Ram College, Department of Political Science. And obvious, her talk was uh, different because she took so many important issues which we just neglected. So thank you, Amrita, for having these kind of talks. And the third talk, Miss Sonam from Ambedkar College, The Noise of Democracy. उसका हिंदी किया था लोकतंत्र के हुंकार, और सच में वो जो टॉक था वो आपका हुंकार ही था. थैंक यू सोनम. एंड द लास्ट टॉक इज मिस्टर तरुण मिश्रा, घटता हुआ साहित्य और पाठन प्रभाव, 29 अगस्त. तरुण को सबने सुना, उसका टॉक काफ़ी बढ़िया था, काफ़ी बच्चों ने पार्टिसिपेट किया था. उसकी हिंदी पे जिस तरह की कमांड थी वो बहुत अद्भुत है वो. और सभी लोगों को कहीं ना कहीं इम्प्रूवमेंट की ज़रूरत है, और हमने एक बहुत डेमोक्रेटिक वे रखा है इस प्रोसेस का, और अल्टीमेटली मुझे विनर अनाउंस करना पड़ेगा, और एक बहुत फेयर एटमॉस्फेयर में हम लोग डिसाइड करते हैं. और तो फॉर दिस मंथ आई एम गोइंग टू अनाउंस द विनर ऑफ last month speaker, Mr. Tarun Mishra from Dayal College. Tarun, if you want to say something, so it would be good for us. Tarun, and congratulations for all. And Tarun, I invite you to give us your idea.
थैंक यू सो मच सर. आज मेरे लिए अत्यंत हर्ष का पल है कि मुझे स्पीकर ऑफ द मंथ चुना गया है, और यह किसी भी स्वप्न से कम नहीं है. मैं भाव विभोर हूँ, निशब्द हूँ. सबसे पहले तो मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहूँगा पूरी GSTS टीम का, क्योंकि जिस तरह से ये आपके साथ काम करते हैं शुरुआत से लेकर अंत तक, यह देखकर मेरा मन बहुत खुश होता है. पहले दिन कॉल करने से लेकर जिस दिन टॉक है उस दिन तक ये पूरी टीम जिस तरह से सहयोग करती है, वो शायद यह बताता है कि GSTS पूरे दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में ही नहीं बल्कि बाहर भी क्यों सफल है. मनीष सर, हमेशा सर के चेहरे पे एक मुस्कान रहती है, और हंसते हंसते बहुत अच्छी अच्छी बातें सर बताते हैं. और जो भी यहाँ पार्टिसिपेट करने की इच्छा रखते हैं, मैं आप सबको आश्वासन देना चाहूँगा कि यहाँ से बहुत कुछ अच्छा सीख कर आप जाएंगे. जो कंस्ट्रक्टिव क्रिटिसिज्म आपको यहाँ पर मिलता है वह आपको एक बेहतर मनुष्य बनाने में तो सहायता जरूर प्रदान करेगा, मैं ऐसा समझता हूँ. और मैं प्रयास करूंगा कि GSTS से और भी लोग जुड़ें, क्योंकि यहाँ पर बोलने का अवसर मिलता है, और अगर हम अपने जीवन में बोलना ही नहीं बल्कि अच्छा बोल पाते हैं तो आप और प्रभावी और सफल रहते हैं, क्योंकि सुना उसी को जाता है जो बोलने में सक्षम होता है. बाकी मैं अपने से सभी बड़े मित्रों साथियों जो उस दिन मुझे सुनने आए उनके प्रति अपनी कृतज्ञता व्यक्त करना चाहूँगा, और सबसे महत्वपूर्ण अपने माता पिता को मैं प्रणाम करना चाहूँगा जिनके कारण मैं यहाँ पर हूँ, और यूं कहें मेरी श्वास जिनके होने से है. बस ज़्यादा समय न लेते हुए मैं यही संदेश देना चाहूँगा कि सदैव प्रयत्नशील रहें, और बाधाएं आती रहती हैं तो उनके सामने घुटने न टेकें बल्कि उनका हिम्मत से सामना करें. प्रयास बस इतना रहे कि आप जो भी करें उसमें आपका और हमारे भारत का भलाई छिपा रहा हो. और एक बार पुनः मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सबका देना चाहूंगा. थैंक यू.
Thank you, Mr. Tarun, and a hearty congratulations to you. And अब मैं दोबारा से हमारे टॉक के मुख्य अतिथि डॉक्टर आनंद कुमार को बुलाना चाहूंगी. सर, प्लीज कम एंड ग्रेस अस विद योर वैल्यूएबल वर्ड्स.
थैंक यू. मुझे ये कहना ही पड़ेगा कि समृद्धि का जो प्रेजेंटेशन था वो बहुत समृद्ध था, और कई मायनों में जितना इंफॉर्मेटिव, जितना एक्सप्लेनेटरी समृद्धि का यह प्रयास वाकई बहुत सराहनीय है. समृद्धि, कीप इट अप, and the way you have pointed out the elements of I would just, since the time is not allowing us, I mean, we have now a few minutes left. I would just, say one or two things that, the way you have pointed out, the aspect of feminism by talking about Sita, Draupadi. There are, many other characters which also need to be looked at. For example, Mandodari. Look at the character of Mandodari. I mean, knowing the fact that, her husband is out for a war, which he is certain to lose, and the way she is, trying to involve herself with the entire thing. Look at, Lakshman's wife, you know, Urmila. There are so many other, female characters who are so very powerful. Urmila's character. लिटरेचर में कई लोगों ने इनके ऊपर कभी कविताएं और बाकी चीजें लिखी हैं. But when we are talking about this aspect of feminism, we also need to, look at many other characters. I mean, besides the central character that are there. And also, I was really, really impressed by the kind of questions that were put up. I mean, I salute to the students of, all the participants who are there. So keenly involved you all are. I mean, my salute to all of you. I mean, 50 students listening to this in this Sunday evening. This is remarkable. And my full appreciation to Manish and his team, to the entire department. So I would just say that, one of the questions that apex, the reliability, the authenticity and all. Apex, by nature, they are not actually, framed in time. They evolve over a period of time. They are not, just, one point in time that they were, composed and then they are there. No, it's not, that. If you look at that, there are many interpolations. There are many which would come with all these things. So I think it's the, just a second. So we have to, look at this, that how this, am I audible? मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. एक बीच में call आ गया. So, this is how we have to look at, the readings of Apex. So, congratulations to all of you. Congratulations to the winner of the Speaker of the Month. And good going, Shamdal College Evening History Department. Keep it up. My best wishes to all of you. If ever I can be of any help, please let me know. I'd be just happy to, be there. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
थैंक यू सर. आपके भाषणों से हमें बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिला. आपने जैसे फेमिनिज्म में अपने और दो गुट जोड़ के मंदोदरी और उर्मिला का जैसे आपने एग्जांपल दिया, वो बेहद अच्छा था. एंड जैसे आपने बताया कि एपिक्स कोई एक समय से टिका नहीं रहता है, वो समय के पहिए में घूमता ही रहता है. हमें आशा है कि हमारे पूरे दर्शकों को यहाँ बहुत सारी चीजों का जानने का मौका मिला होगा. अब ये समय आ गया है कि हम अपने कार्यक्रम का समापन करें. मैं अब धन्यवाद प्रस्ताव देने हेतु मिस सुवी सिंह को आमंत्रित करना चाहूंगी.
The light of the world, the beacon in the dark, and the hope that gives us strength to survive is our teacher. As it is said, good teachers are reason why ordinary students dream to do extraordinary things. I wish you all a very happy Teachers' Day. I, Shubhi Singh, got a golden opportunity to deliver a vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank our guest of honor, Dr. Anand Kumar, who gave his vital time from his busy schedule and attended the event today. Thank you for your admiring words and graceful opinion. Your words will always be in our mind. I would like to express my gratitude to convener Dr. D.N. Singh for gracing us in the program. I would also like to thank all the teachers, Dr. Simmi, Dr. Pankaj, that joined us today and graced us with their presence in this program. I would like to thank all the SACT, GSTS, and JCC members who worked hard to conduct the event successfully. I wholeheartedly thanks to Speaker Ms. Samriddhi Kandpal for such an exceptional and informative talk on the topic revisiting epics, the Greek and Indian mythology. Thank you so much, Ms. Samriddhi, and earnest thanks to all the students who joined us today. I hope the event has proved beneficial for you. Thank you so much for being with us.